the camera, I guess. Okay. Well, thank you all for having me here. It's great to be here. It's terrific to meet you all. Some of you I know from your activities online. I've seen you getting hauled away places. Some of you I know by reputation, and others it's great to meet for the first time. So it is a real pleasure to be here and to be accepted into this group so graciously and generously. It's real nice. I'd like to spend a little bit of time just telling my story. Ruth asked me to tell my story and then kind of get into a little bit of discussion about raising the stakes and how I see the other side has been raising the stakes, why it's necessary for us to raise the stakes, and what that actually means, both in terms of actions and in consequences. And hopefully I don't run my mouth too much. I'm from New Jersey originally. I love to run my mouth. I mean, I would run my mouth to that ugly love seat over there all night long, if you let me, by myself. But so hopefully, because there is like a wealth of knowledge and experience in this room that I want to hear from. So, let alone you all to discuss. But yeah, I mean, I'm from a pretty textbook Northeast family. My family's pretty much my parents. Their parents were off the boat. They were poor. So growing up, it was kind of like to go through high school, do well, go to college. My father was lucky in terms of getting into some jobs. He didn't even finish high school because he got, had my sister when he was 16, but ended up kind of doing well for himself and becoming a director of an industrial gas company and kind of rising up. And by the time I was in high school, we were upper middle class, lower wealthy type of deal. And so I go to a good private college. But for me, and as I've been discussing with some other people, as I look back 20 some odd years, it was all about getting into the establishment, all about becoming part of the system. And so actually when I was in high school, I wanted to go to West Point, or I wanted to go to Annapolis, or I wanted to be in ROTC when I was in college. And I had that opportunity. But in the summer of 1990, and I don't tell this story a lot because it complicates my whole story, but in the summer of 1990, Saddam Hussein invades Kuwait. George H.W. Bush says this aggression cannot stand. He drops the 82nd Airborne into Saudi Arabia, and we have the Gulf War 6-7 months later. That had a huge impact on me because at that point, when I was a senior in high school, and I'm thinking of going to Annapolis or West Point, or I'm thinking of doing ROTC or whatever it would have been, I come to this realization, watching the war on CNN, and particularly once the ground war starts, and then we slaughter so many thousands of Iraqis that I can't kill anyone, that I don't want to do it. And so I do. I turn down the ROTC scholarships. I don't pursue West Point and Annapolis, and I go to college. And I go through college and I do my thing, and then I go and I work for a couple of years in finance, and I'm bored. And so I end up joining the Marine Corps because I'm bored, because I want to take part in things, I want to do stuff, I want adventure, and I want excitement and everything else. And so I go and 1996 into 1997, and then by the time I get into Officer Candidate School, it's January 1998, and in the Marine Corps, and become a combat engineer officer. They send me to Okinawa, Japan, spend 3 years in Okinawa, Japan. Through a lot of Forrest Gump-like stuff, I end up in the Secretary of the Navy's office as a junior Marine captain on the personal staff of the Secretary of the Navy. And I'm seeing very senior stuff at a very junior level. And then the Iraq War starts. And the war becomes very personal for me very quickly, because one of my jobs was White House liaison officer. And one of the requirements, or one of the duties of that job, was the correspondence for the White House on behalf of the Marine Corps matters. So I was responsible to write the letters on behalf of President Bush for the Marines who were killed in Iraq. So one of the things that happened was the second Marine who was killed in Iraq, we had the wrong address for. Happens. 19, 20-year-old kid, he's got the wrong address in his red, which is record of emergency data. That happens. I mean, it's a 19-year-old kid or a 20-year-old kid. So the letter gets returned. White House, understandably, very upset. My boss, who is the executive assistant to the Secretary of the Navy, says, Captain Ho, you are now going to call every casualty officer for every Marine killed in Iraq. Casualty officer is the Marine officer who is located nearest to the family of the deceased, of the Marine who was killed, who will take care of the family during the funeral process, okay? So it's a Marine officer who's on recruiting duty or who is on a base nearby or something like that. If you've ever seen the movie, the HBO film, Taking Chance with Kevin Bacon, it goes into that a little bit. And that film does a pretty good representation of that whole process. But anyway, so my job is to call every casualty officer of every Marine who's killed in Iraq during the invasion. And so the war becomes very quickly, becomes very personal very quickly for me because I'm talking to these guys. And because the Marine Corps doesn't do anything to prepare for the war on the casualty side. So it screws up the entire casualty process. And the Marine Corps hurts a lot of families. And so I'm hearing this, and I'm talking to families directly because of my position in the Secretary's office. I have a lot of ability to get things done. I won't go into all that, but eventually it becomes a big deal, and eventually a lot of this made it into the news. Okay, things that occurred because of the way we treated the families of dead and wounded Marines and later dead and wounded sailors and soldiers and everything else. But so just to say that, the war became very personal very quickly. Okay, so go through all this, and then I go to Iraq, and I go to Iraq a couple times. The guilt of the war builds quick, okay, and it doesn't let go. And I want to skip over some things in my own bio because I want to get into the raising the stakes part, or else we'll be here without hearing from you all. But what happens is that as I keep trying to give the establishment a chance, as I keep trying to give the Marine Corps a chance, as I keep trying to give the country a chance, as I keep trying to give the generals a chance, as I keep trying to give, you know, everything a chance, it doesn't seem to work. But I don't want to give up my opportunity. I don't want to give up my chance to maybe make it work or to help it work, or my chance to continue to be in the establishment. So I keep hedging what I'm going to do. So eventually, after I've left the Marine Corps and gone into the State Department, because I think that, foolishly, that the Obama administration is going to be different than the Bush administration and is actually going to seek a political solution to the conflict in Afghanistan, which it's not. It's going to do just like the Bush administration did, escalate the war to try and find a military solution, or at best, escalate the war for an appearance of victory so that we can withdraw or retreat so that we can then claim some form of victory and then blame it on the Afghans, as they basically did. I resigned from my position in the State Department in 2009 in protest. And so that begins my form of anti-war activism. That begins my resistance against the war. But it's continued to be hedged. I hedged the whole time. So I don't say everything that I want to say. I don't do everything I could have done. I don't reveal. When I first come back, I don't plan on speaking out. It's only because the State Department personally annoys me so much and angers me so much that I call the Washington Post, right? I mean, it's just like things like that occur. It's because I'm supposed to meet with the Vice President's National Security Advisor, and I feel that I've been personally blown off that I contact the Washington Post, right? You know, it's things like that. It's not because I've had any, because I feel like I still want to be a part of it. I feel like there's still a place for me in it, because I know the stories of Richard Holbrooke. I know the stories of Tony Lake. I know the stories of people who resigned but then went back in and still had a place in the establishment. So I hedge. I don't say anything. When I first meet Dan Ellsberg, actually when he first calls me, I'm in Union Station at Audubon Pond. I'm getting a cup of coffee. I'm supposed to go up to New York to be on some TV show or whatever to talk about this stuff. Yeah. And the first thing Dan Ellsberg says is, "Did you bring any documents with you?" You know. And I didn't though. I didn't because it wasn't even a thought to me because that would have violated the rules. And if I had violated the rules, that would have assured that I would never have a place again ever in the establishment. That would have made sure I would never have an opportunity to go back in. Okay? And I'm being told by Richard Holbrooke's people that you're doing a great job, you're doing great stuff for us, because at that point in fall of '09, there are people in the administration, like Dick Holbrooke, Carl Eikenberry, who don't agree with the escalation of the war. There are plenty of people who do, trust me, but there are some who really don't. And so what they're telling me is that you being on television, you doing all this stuff, you being on NPR, it's really helping us. And they're telling me it is. And so I'm thinking, wow, these guys are really they're really gonna have my back later. They're gonna bring me back on. You know, I'm a fool. Okay, I'm naive, I'm gullible. You know, and I want it, okay? Because that's what I want. When I had this idea that I would be a Deputy or Assistant Secretary of State or something like that. Because I thought that I might be at some point the one who would actually make the system work. Okay, because that's what I was brought up in. I was brought up with this idea that the system could work, the system might work. This is what my grandparents came over here for, right? This is what it's all about. And it worked for my parents. They rose up out of poverty out of New York, you know. My dad came up out of, you know, what he came up out of, and now they're retired and doing well and everything. I mean, why can't it work for? I went through public schools and went to a good private college, and, you know, why won't it work? I just didn't understand how the system really worked. So, anyway, you know, I'm hedging on these things, and so I don't speak out like I should. I say things like, even though I know they're counterproductive, and I know that the killing is wrong, I say things like, we shouldn't be using ground troops, but the drones are okay. You know, and I say this in the Wall Street Journal. You know, I have an opportunity right now for the Wall Street Journal, so that's what I say. And a friend of mine counsels me on it. He's a priest at St. Bonaventure University, or a brother at St. Bonaventure University. And he calls me and he says, "I'm disappointed in you." He's like, "You were just up here and we had this long conversation about this. And I know that's not what's in your heart." And it really struck me, you know. And I said, okay. But I still hedge. I still go on with it, you know, because I've got a place now in a think tank in Washington, D.C., and it's a leftist think tank. It's the Center for National Policy, you know. It's like we're for justice and to get rid of militarism and all kinds of stuff like that, right? But it's still a think tank, and they still have donors. And Obama is the president, so you gotta be careful what to say because our donors like Obama. If Bush was the president, say all you want about him. But Obama's the president, and we're not making rent payments. So be careful what you say about criticizing them. Be careful what you say about these wars. Yeah. Okay, so hedge a bit, you know? So I go on and on and on, okay? But as I'm doing this, as I'm hedging, I'm seeing other people doing things that are true to them, that are clear to them. Right? That are clear to their purpose, clear to who they are, clear to their principles, that are real. And I keep getting spots on television, I keep going on CNN, I keep doing this and that, but it doesn't make a difference, it doesn't change anything. And what I see the government doing, our government doing, is continue the war, continue the killing, continue the mutilation, continue the suffering. And start doing things in a manner that I never thought we would do. And specifically, I start thinking about the way we start conducting our airstrikes in Pakistan, in Yemen, and Somalia, in terms of going after first responders and funerals. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. What we would do, they've said they stopped it, I don't believe it. What we would do is we would hit a target, we would hit, and even I'm trying to get myself out of this. I'm trying to get myself out of saying target, because it's not a target, it's people. So we would kill a car with people in it, and we all know that most likely that car does not have the people we intended to kill in it.
right? We have leaked documents that the Intercept published that said up to 90% of the time we hit people that we don't intend to kill. Okay, so 9 out of 10 times we're killing people that we don't intend to kill with our drones. So when they go to bury those people, we then bomb the funeral, or we bomb the first responders who responded to, this is what we do. As a people, this is what we do. So my anger is welling up. And so I can't hedge anymore. How can I hedge? So I start speaking out, more vitriolic. I start doing some more things. I start engaging more with Veterans for Peace, because I didn't do too much Veterans for Peace beforehand, because those guys were a little bit too extreme for me. If I get arrested, I really can't go to I can't take part in a debate at Brookings if I get arrested. It's just not done. I mean, just not, you know, I got to put a suit on, and, you know, I mean, it's just not the polite thing to do, you know, it's not respectable. It's just nonsense. I mean, it's crazy. But so I've been aware of this war tax resistance idea. And I start Googling it and start thinking about it. And really struck by the slogan, you know, if you're working for peace, stop paying for war. And so 2013 comes around, and I don't do it. It's too complicated or whatever. I make excuses for myself. And then 2014 comes around, and the same thing too. I file my taxes late, where I put in what do you call it, a extension, and of course I do my taxes the last minute possible and make excuses and don't do it again. And so what happens actually, this is the point I want to get to later about what we can do as people in the movement, is I'm at a talk in DC, I'm at an event in DC in like March or so of 2015, and I've said to myself, I'm definitely going to do war tax resistance this year. And so I'm giving my talk, and I'm going on about whatever I'm ranting about, you know. And somebody in the crowd, I think it may have been Ruth, yells out, "Are you going to pay your taxes this year?" And I say, "No."
I wish it was me, but it wasn't.
Okay, it wasn't you. I don't know. And I was so grateful for that, because it put me on the spot, right? It puts me on the spot, and so now I can't pay my. Now I have to do it. Now I've really got it. I still filed an extension and paid it last minute, but no, I didn't actually. No, I didn't. I paid my taxes. I did it on time that year because I brought the thing and everything. So, but so it put me on the spot, and so I had to do it. You know, I mean, so that's one thing we can do is encourage people. Either encourage people nicely or put them on the spot in front of 250 other people, you know, on camera, you know, live streamed on the Real News Network or whatever we were being streamed on, you know, I mean, like, put them on the spot, you know, get them on YouTube for, you know, time immemorial. But, you know, I mean, so what I saw, though, was as I was denying myself, as I was denying what was in me, that was in me when I was 17, 18 years old, what I knew right away when I saw the Gulf War occurring on CNN, that I couldn't take part in. But then I lied to myself and denied because I wanted something that was just, you know, that I wanted to be part of the establishment, part of the American system. You know, the American government, the actual system itself, never denied what it was. It continued to be itself. It continued to grow, it continued to metastasize, it continued to swallow and chew and kill. And I mean, now we stand. I actually got a call today from a journalist, and he asked me a question about Kandahar. And I said, you know, I really don't have that level of information. One thing I haven't been doing too much the last couple of years for a couple of different reasons, but also too, like, I just can't pay that much attention in particular to Afghanistan, because a few years ago, I could pay attention to Afghanistan because we really were only militarily involved in 2 countries. Now we're involved in 7 countries. And I just can't pay that much attention or have that level of detail to one place because it's impossible. And then frankly, it doesn't matter. Because the American war machine, the American empire, exists in the same manner and shape everywhere it is. So the commonality is a similarity to what it does in Afghanistan. It does the same thing in Libya or Syria or Yemen or Iraq, or, I mean, it may look a little different or whatever, but the same way it operates, the same way it kills, the same way it wastes, it does the same thing. The same way it interacts with people, the same way it consumes, it's the same thing. People used to ask me that all the time when I was speaking a lot about Afghanistan. They'd say, well, you were both in Iraq and Afghanistan. What are the similarities and differences between the country? I'd say, it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that the American military is in both places. That's the thing that matters. That's the same thing. You guys are missing they're like, you're not an Afghan expert, you're not an Iraq expert, but it doesn't matter. You're an American military expert. It's the same American military that's in both places. The same outcome is going to happen. It's been the same outcome in every place the American military's been. You know, whether it's been in this country with the Native Americans, whether it's been in the Philippines, you know, whether it's been in Vietnam, whether it's been in the Middle East, it's the same outcome. So as we get into this discussion about raising the stakes, and as I found myself having to raise the stakes and you know, basically cut my ties with Washington, D.C., get out of Washington, D.C., I actually just did an interview the other day with the Real News Network, and they had my bio listed as with Center for International Policy, but I'm really not with them any longer, and cut my ties with those organizations and everything, and do a lot more with VFP and be a war tax lister and be more honest with myself and be like, look, I can't support killing. I can't hedge. I can't give these arguments that are false or somewhat convoluted or meant to allow a little bit of this person in over here or this person over here or, you know, in some way political. No, it just, you cannot have it. What the American military, what the American government is doing overseas is wrong. It's barbaric. And the American empire is wantonly destroying lives, not just overseas, but here at home. And it has to be stopped. What I'm afraid of, and the raising the stakes goes both ways, and I think that's why we have to have this discussion about how do we raise the stakes, because as I said, as the American government continued to raise the stakes, under the Obama administration, I think it was more subtle raising the stakes, as we saw with the way they escalated the use of the drones. As you know, under this administration now, I think it is a much more less subtle, much more destructive. We've seen that with the loosening of the restrictions on the airstrikes. We have seen that with the way we are just killing people in a manner that we have not done since the worst days of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, in terms of the airstrikes that we're seeing in Yemen, in Syria and Iraq right now, as well as some of the reports coming out of Yemen. Anand Gopal, who is one of the best journalists out there, his descriptions of the airstrikes that are occurring in Mosul are absolutely horrific. And the way the Pentagon is lying about it is absolutely sickening. We're also seeing, too, the way the American military dropped the mother of all bombs on that district in Afghanistan for no purpose other than to punish those people there. They claimed it was to go after the tunnels. You don't use a bomb that bursts above ground against tunnels. You use a penetrating bomb. That bomb only punished the people that were living in that area. And as I said to Michael earlier, for a number of years, I was on an organization, a political organization. We gave money to candidates, Democratic candidates, because they supposedly would work to decrease nuclear weapons. So it's very political, you know, it's a PAC. And I stopped after 6 years being on it, as a number of things. One, because I was hedging being part of that, you know. And those 6 years, though, working on issues of nuclear weapons, I was never afraid of nuclear war. And now I'm afraid of nuclear war. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I'm worried about is that we have an administration that will use one of
our gravity-dropped nuclear bombs on North Korea. We have, and it's not the administration that scares me. I mean, it scared me, don't get me wrong. But it's our generals. We have generals, same generals that served under Obama, same generals that served under Bush, same generals that served under, Clinton, I mean, same men and women who use the phrase usable nuclear weapons. And I really believe that they feel that these weapons are usable. That if you take if you take this bomb, ratchet it down to its lowest setting possible, because with the nuclear bombs you could dial them down or dial them up. You dial it down to its lowest setting possible, that it would be acceptable to drop it on a North Korean nuclear site. I really believe we have men and women in Washington, D.C. And if we look at the response from the U.S. Congress after Donald Trump fired off the missiles at Syria, where in the House we only really had one member of Congress who actively spoke out against that in the sense of like, this is wrong, this is dangerous, this is not what we need to do, whereas the other members of Congress who opposed it on the grounds that it was not constitutional. I'm afraid that we won't really have anyone who is standing up against it. Because all the statements coming out from our lawmakers right now, from really everyone, is that North Korea is a threat, North Korea is dangerous, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm really afraid that we are in a place where our government is willing to take another step forward on this, to raise the stakes themselves, because nothing has stopped them so far. And they are the type of men and women who are vindictive, petty, and they feel like they can get away with it. So in terms of us raising the stakes, it's something I want to speak to you about, because you guys certainly have a lot more experience on this than I do. You've done a lot more of this than I have. Again, I really appreciate you all having me here. I'm happy to be part of the organization, part of this this fellowship. And I appreciate so many of you all kind of going before me in this, in providing the way forward, ending your resistance, and by showing a way to be strong, to be resolute, and to not follow your heart, your soul, and your principles. And we really want to thank you all for providing that to people like me. And I think there will be a lot more people like me following as well. So thank you very much.